mixing mortar using sand and cement. So there's a couple of things we want to go through before we start. First thing is make sure your mixer is on a nice level surface. You don't want it uneven because it will either be tilted back or tilted forward. It's not going to mix properly then. Another thing is to make sure your extension lead hasn't got any bits of cable where you're going to trip over or anything like that. So make sure that's nice and flat on the ground. Also, if you've got any long hair, make sure that's tied back so it's not getting caught in the drum. Okay, so what we need is a nice clean shovel. We've got our cement, we've got our mortar plasticizer, that's quite important, and we've got our sand here. So we'll start with our mortar plasticizer, or feb as people like to call it. This will make sure you've got a nice smooth mix. It basically puts air into the mix. But the key is you don't want too much or too little. Too much would be a weak mix because there's too much air in it. And too little will mean you get water coming to the surface and it won't bind together. A lot of people like to mix it with the water, but I like to put it straight in. Reason being, if your sand's really wet and you're not putting much water in, and the feb is in the water, then you end up with no feb in the mix. So all the febs are different. You want to read the back of your bottle. I use the same one every time so I know what I'm putting in. But read the back of the bottle and say how much to put in. Just put a couple of glugs of this in. Then make sure you've got good clean water. The amount of water you start off will depend on how wet or dry your sand is. So don't put too much in to start. I'm just going to put a quarter of a bucket in here. Before we switch it on, it's quite important to know to keep the shovelfuls the same size every time. So keep your sand the same size every time and try and match out the cement. If you're putting your sand in like that, you're never going to get a shovelful of cement that big. So try and keep them all the same size, something like that. That's good. If you want to gauge the mix using buckets, that's fine, because you've got the same amount going in every time. We're going to show you using a shovel this time. Okay, so it's going to be a 4-to-1 mix, so that's 4 sand, 1 cement, and we'll add them in increments of 4. So we'll put our first 4 in, and then the cement, and then we'll see if we need to add more water, and then put another 4 sand in, another cement, and so on. You don't want to overfill the mixer either, so you need to be 12 sand, 3 cement, or 16 sand, 4 cement. But any more than that and they're getting a bit full and they can't mix properly. So we're going to go for it now. We'll make sure our cement is the same size as our sand total. That size there. And just stand out the way of all the cement dust. You don't really want to be breathing that in every time you mix. This here, we can add another 4-to-1 with that without putting any more water in because that's a bit sloppy. So we'll put another 4 and 1 in. Don't be tempted to glug a load of water if it's looking dry because it will wet itself up as it mixes. So this is starting to wet itself up. So we'll add another 4 and 1 in because I don't think we can put any more water in at the moment. Keep your cement shovelfuls the same size. If we look there, it's looking fairly dry in the mixer there, but don't be tempted to add too much water to that. We're only going to add a tiny bit because it will get wetter as it mixes. And if you look in there now, the consistency we got. Key thing is letting it mix without adding too much water because it will make itself do a nice mix. If you put water in too much at the start, it'll go wet too quickly and it won't have had time to mix. The key is give it time. You'll see it start to come now. Another key thing is making sure it's not dry at the back. If you don't put enough water in at the start, it will be dry at the back and it won't mix properly. Now where I'm happy with the mix. I haven't added much water to that, it's been wetting itself up on its own. But we're at the point where we can add some water to give us our consistency that we want, depending on what you're doing. Because I'm plastering with this, I'm going to add a bit of water to it. I want it a bit wetter. Watch out for any splashes as you put the water in as well. And just remember, the mix needs time, so don't rush it, don't be tempted to pile the water in. You can really see that coming together now. Right, we're almost ready to tip it out now. We'll have the barrow ready. We'll give the barrow a quick wet down. Make sure the barrow's sitting nice and level and sitting in the correct place. So you don't want to pile all the mix on one side, so it'll tip the barrow over. So you're going to tip it out nice and steady. We're happy with that consistency now, so I'll show you one more time in here. So just tip it out nice and steady. Okay, so it's a nice creamy consistency in here, nice smooth mixture, easily movable. If you get water rising to the surface once you start pushing the barrow around, that's usually a sign of a bad mix and it's not gonna bind well or be easy to use. So a sign of a good mix is no water rising to the surface when you move about with it. There should be an even consistency right the way through that wheelbarrow. And this now is just right for what we want. So when it comes to cleaning the mixer out, you want to scrape out all the cement you can. Make sure it's off when you put your hand in. And then you can fill it with stones and water. You don't want too big stones because that's just going to damage your drum. And make sure you're facing away from cars or houses or anything like that because it will splash. So we've got some stones here. I wouldn't go with anything bigger than that, you'll damage your drum. Just turn it on.